Super Smash Bros. Melee. It's a game that's been around for close to 20 years now, and despite its age, it has a large and loyal fan base. Some of these players even go above and beyond just playing the game, taking matters into their own hands to either create new ways to play or code new quality of life features in or around the game itself. One of these players is Fizzi, the creator of Project Slippi, a large-scale project that adds features such as replays, complex game stats, real-time mirroring, and rollback netcode into Super Smash Bros. Melee. I spoke with Fizzi earlier this year to find out about his origins of Smash, as well as how Project Slippi came together.
I played when I was a kid. I played 64. And then when Melee came out, I played casually. And then Brawl came out. So I started playing Brawl competitively. And it was pretty fun for a bit. I was pretty decent in the Montreal scene. And then eventually some of the Montreal scene got me into Melee. And like Melee more seriously. And I think like after that, I sort of drifted away from Brawl a little bit slowly. Got sick of being camped while I was playing D2D. And I started playing Melee more, and you know, I just fell in love with Melee. It's just so good. I mean, I think there's so much depth, so much to prove yourself in. The movement is amazing. It doesn't ever feel like you're limited by the game, I think. That's the big thing for me. And you know, when Brawl came out, people thought, oh, we're just gonna switch to Brawl now. You know, like at that time, it was the first game after Melee. So people were like, oh yeah, we're just gonna switch to Brawl. And I think over time, people realized just like, Brawl just didn't hold a candle to Melee. Like it wasn't the same experience. People didn't draw as much enjoyment out of it. And I think people just slowly drifted to Melee. And I think after that point, it just kind of became a thing after that point. People were just like, oh yeah, when the new game comes out, we're just gonna play Melee. Yeah, Dan Salvato was probably one of the biggest trailblazers to Melee modding. Since then, I mean, he's quite famous. He made a DDLC, Doki Doki Literature Club. I watched his videos, his early videos about how to, you know, mod the game and like look at the hex and try to determine like where certain memory locations are being accessed and so on and so forth. 20XX was made by Achilles, also a really early modder. It was a much broader scale mod than I think had ever been done before. And it was kind of targeted at like trying to help people improve. I think it's sort of the predecessor to what is now training mode, which is made by Uncle Punch. And it's just basically like, people want to get good at Melee. We don't really have the tools for it that well. And I think 20XX added a lot of that, as well as a lot of other like, you know, nice quality of life things. So those are kind of like the early modders. And I think obviously they were a huge inspiration to me. A lot of like what I did is thanks to them. In fact, early on, Achilles helped me directly to make the first sort of EXI push code. Honestly, even without Homebrew, I think the game would still be going. Though it's definitely, I think, kept people especially excited about the scene. Because it's like, you know, a lot of people say, oh, I love the Melee scene. And I think it's for this reason. Like we just do what we can to support our game, you know? And I think like the Homebrew scene has allowed us to do things that ideally we would have liked our developer to do, but we don't have a developer, so.
Project Slippi was initially created to collect complex stats throughout a game of Melee to help better tell the narrative of a match. Want to know how much damage you've done, or what each player's openings and conversions look like? Well, Slippi can do that. But it has also grown to do so much more. What can Slippi do, and what drove Fizzi to not only create it, but also to expand past the initial vision of the project?
The initial start is just like, damn, wouldn't this be so cool? I just wanted to be like, oh, can I create complex statistics for Melee? And at first, you know, I didn't feel like it was possible. And I think that's kind of the same with all the aspects of the project. It's like, at first I'm like, this doesn't seem possible. And then I think about it, and then I slowly start to realize, like, maybe I can do this. Obviously, I have a sense to the impact from the beginning, but a lot of the things I get into are more probably for the challenge of it. I want to challenge myself, and I want to prove to myself this is possible and I can do it. And obviously, like I said, the impact is important. I wouldn't do that if like there was no impact to what I was doing. But I think the challenge is really what drives me to try.
As soon as he died, the hardware detected that somebody died. It then wrote down how many seconds since the game started from when that person dies, as well as the amount of stocks left, the percentage both characters are at, and the last move both characters connected with. As you can see, player 1's last move was knee.
The data is pushed to slot B on the Wii or GameCube. That's called the EXI bus. And so we push data out to there. And if you push data out to there, you can really listen to it in a bunch of different ways. Like, for example, the first version of Slippi was hardware. So it was literally a card that you plugged into the console. And then we had a separate board that would like listen to the data that was coming in, and we'd use that data to generate stats. But also, you know, this is something I kind of realized later, but you can do like emulated memory cards in like Nintendo, and also Dolphin supports, you know, emulated memory cards. So instead of an emulated memory card, you can have an emulated Slippi device. Originally, it was always designed to be hardware, but I realized later it doesn't have to be. It can be emulated, and then, you know, people don't have to buy anything to use it.
5, 1, 9, let's go! And I already have the launcher open. It's pointed at the correct directory. So here's our new game. We got Game & Watch, Luigi, Peach, and Roy. And let's just launch it.
I mean, the game never had replays before Slippi, right? And so they didn't need to be perfectly deterministic. I think it was like, the game was mostly deterministic, but there was just like sort of these weird edge cases and situations where things just wouldn't exactly happen the same. It sort of got compounded with the fact that we had created some of our own mods. I think one of the hardest things was UCF to make deterministic, because UCF did not use inputs the way the game used inputs. UCF is universal controller fix. Different controllers are better at doing certain tech in Melee, specifically dashbacks and shield drops are the most common one. I think UCF is doing a few more things now or whatever, but you know, people always talked about the controller lottery where you had to like get a really good controller, and you know, players would pay hundreds of dollars to get a controller that had good dashbacks and good shield drops. And UCF is a mod that makes it so that, you know, dashbacks and shield drops are more consistent on more controllers. And making it work properly was a pain. I'm still not 100% sure it always works properly, but you know, a lot of the RNG stuff we had to discover. Sometimes we would notice like RNG would desync, and it didn't really make sense why. And honestly, we still don't know why sometimes RNG desyncs, and we kind of just worked around it by backing up and restoring the RNG at the start of the frame pipeline, like before anything happens, so that when anything of import happens, like, you know, pulling turnips or whatever, it's all correct.
There was a bug where Game & Watch and Luigi caused desyncs. I was very sad to find that out, but the good news is I fixed it. All right. And yes, we have a 9.
Mirroring, in essence, is just taking a replay file and transferring it to a computer in real time, and then playing it in Dolphin. And Dolphin, like you mentioned, has a lot that it can do. It can upscale the quality, and also, like, you know, people are able to use it and then get a custom HUD, because the replay file not only includes inputs, it also includes a whole bunch of stats and stuff like percentages or whatever. And I think like it was really important for Melee in particular, because Melee, you can only get a 480p output out of the Wii. That was your max. That was your, like, you couldn't do any better than that. And 480p nowadays is like not great. I mean, it just doesn't look very good when you're showing it on a 1080p stream, right? Now you can send the replay file, play it in Dolphin, and you can get a 4K stream if you want. Like, I think there's so much you can do with this stuff. And I'm always sad because I feel like a lot of times I have to be the one to drive it. You have to be the one to show what you could do before anyone else does it. This was the case with like automatic combo videos or whatever, right? It's like, I had to do that first before people were like, oh, this is actually pretty good. And, you know, I mean, it makes sense. I made it. So I thought about like a lot of this stuff. But even now, there's like so much you can do with stats, and like the way stats can like drive a narrative for a tournament. No one has even touched on what is possible there. I think Leva did the best job of really kind of taking it and like showcasing what it was possible, like what was really possible. I think maybe his radar went a little bit farther than I thought people would go. That was kind of a little bit hard. So I was pretty impressed about that.
Project Slippi made waves earlier this year with the announcement of rollback netcode being implemented into its suite of features. While online netplay has been around for some time using the Dolphin emulator on PC, the implementation of rollback allows for much smoother play and a wider search area for connections. We covered the benefits of rollback netcode and how it works in Killer Instinct in our talk with Keats last year. In fact, that video, coupled with Melee's lightning mode, plays a part into the origins of how Melee's rollback came to be.
It had always been mentioned, it's like, oh, you know, can we do rollback netcode for Melee? And, you know, for a long time it was like, it'd be really, really hard. And then eventually I started to think about it more. I switched to full-time Slippi, which, you know, is really kind of what enabled me to start even wanting to tackle it. Because before I would be like, it's just too much, I can't do it. And then eventually it was just like, maybe I can do this. And I think a lot of that was from, you know, your video with Keats was a huge driver, and like me really realizing kind of like a little bit more about how it works. And the infill article too was enormous. Just like really understanding like, okay, what are the components of this thing? And then it's like, once I started to hear about that, I'm like, this, you know, this doesn't feel like it's that complicated. And I think like based on everything else I've done, I think I can start to see how I can make this work in Melee. And I think it was just a matter of like sort of that belief and then deciding to really go for it. And it goes back to what I was mentioning earlier. It just felt like such an exciting challenge. It was just like, man, if I did this, like it would just blow people's minds. And that's the kind of stuff I'm drawn to. And I'm like, I need to do this. I need to try it. I could have worked on so many other things for Slippi to try to make a little bit of money, because I was going full time, so I needed to make a little bit of money, but nothing was nearly as exciting as trying to work on rollback.
Amazingly, I think Melee was set up pretty well, interestingly enough, to implement rollback. I think so, like things being separated enough, at least in the code logic.
Okay.
But I think a large part of that is because of lightning mode. It lets you play the game in like fast forward mode. So basically, in order to build that mode, they had to disconnect the rendering logic from like the game logic. Obviously, what I have to do is I have to like make it decide when to run a bunch of frames and like be able to go back and stuff. And like I still have a lot of stuff to build, but I can be confident that at least the game is fast enough to run multiple frames in one frame at 60 FPS, you know?
Okay.
Which is one of the major hurdles, I think, for other games to implement rollback. Is it's like you need to make sure that your game logic is really efficient, because you have to run multiple frames in one frame.
When you play KI, right? KI has a 3-frame delay. And I think that's a true 3-frame delay. And it seems to me like people are happy playing that way. And as a Melee player, it's hard to kind of wrap my head around that. I think like for us, it's like 3 frames is a lifetime. It's so long. So Slippi has a 2-frame delay built in, but it's not a true 2-frame delay. Dolphin has a bunch of sort of like optimizations and stuff and sort of hacks that allow us to cheat a little bit and show the frames faster than a console would have. And that cheat gives us about 2 frames. So when we say it's a 2-frame delay, it's actually 0, because it's 2 frames minus 2 on a good setup, right? So for us, you know, we can play at 2-frame delay, but it's really CRT speed. And I think like people, you know, really enjoy that a lot, because it's like you're basically playing the real offline game. And it's crazy, even when you go to 3 frames, I think 3 frames is still like very playable. 3 frames being 1 frame, right? 1 effective frame. But like when you get to like 2 effective or 3 effective, it starts to definitely feel pretty sluggish. And I think most Melee players can detect that. The thing I spent probably the most time on is sound. And I sort of cheated a little bit in the way I did save states, right? I probably didn't do it the way, if you were developing your own game, you would do it, right? So the way I did save states is like a pretty major block copy of memory, but you can't do all of memory. And initially I was doing a very large swath, which included all of the sound stuff. And the problem is, if you take a save state and then you go back in time to that save state, you're also going back in time to when that sound was playing. But that sound keeps playing at the same speed. So what ends up happening is you get like these really weird overlapping demonic sounds.
Ready?
So I had to like, this took forever, but I had to like figure out almost everywhere where the game accessed any memory that was related to sound. So I had to find and map out every single memory location where the game accessed anything that had to do with sound, and I had to basically remove it from the save state. That would put me at parity with probably what you'd get in a normal game, where when you roll back, you'd roll back the state, but you wouldn't roll back the sound. Even when I got most of the sound working, like even one of the early tester releases that I did during the private beta still had a lot of sound issues. Like most character voices would just kind of stop. Like things like Falcon Punch, Jigglypuff's Pound, sounds that were like actual character voice sounds would like always not play when there was a rollback. And so I had to like kind of look into the game logic, try to figure out why that was happening. And eventually I was able to fix that, although it's still not fully fixed. There are still some sounds that do not play sometimes when they should. I've noticed it like on Yoshi's Double Jump a lot. Music and Pokemon Stadium are two things, maybe the only two things that read from the disc while you're in game. So that's why currently in Slippi, there is no music and Pokemon Stadium is currently frozen. It's because I turned off the game's ability to read from the disc basically in those two situations so that it wouldn't break. Because what would happen is like it would try to read from the disc, it would like set up memory, then you'd get a rollback, and then it was like the memory was all jumbled up and weird and like the states were wrong, and then it would just be like crash. It was about 7 months. It was 7 months from me starting to work on it to pushing it out live. That said, it had an early rollback prototype after maybe like 2 or 3 months. And I think like the rest of that time is literally, it's just like publish, menu, matchmaking, like all the stuff that makes it good and usable, right? It's like people severely underestimate how long polish takes. It's always like, oh, how do I build the system? And then you don't think about like, how do I then make it usable and good and stuff? And it's like, I feel like polish always takes as much or longer than actually like building the first working prototype. When I was implementing rollback, when I say like that, like 7 months time frame, I'd say that was probably maybe like 95% me, like sort of like product decisions, development, and like everything. But there are other people working on it, especially now. And you know, I've always had sort of like a core team that I've like discussed with at the very least, and that team is Uncle Punch, Nikki, and Metaconstruct. They're great. Nikki, especially since release, has been like super helpful, like project managing, especially like, you know, helping everyone else that wants to contribute and get involved. And Uncle Punch has been pretty critical from the beginning. I think like without Uncle Punch, I don't know if Slippi would exist. He's just so knowledgeable with how Melee works and everything. And like a lot of the original replay stuff he wrote, I don't know if I could have gotten it to where I got it without him. It would have taken, I might have, but I think it would have taken me so much longer. It would have been maybe a bit worse. But obviously from working with him on all the replay stuff, from working on that, I gained confidence to be able to do the rollback thing kind of more by myself. Yeah, and nowadays, like I said, there's a bunch of people that are excited and contributing, and you know, even the last release that we put out had PRs from multiple contributors, just adding some small things and making the system better as a whole, which is great because it means I don't have to do everything. You know, I can focus on specific parts, and you know, other things get better at the same time.
Project Slippi has come far from its initial release, and it's safe to say that it has revolutionized the way players play and watch Melee today. And when thinking about the future, it doesn't seem Fizzi has plans to stop anytime soon.
Oh, everyone wants doubles. No. Not. I don't think everyone wants doubles, but there is a large vocal majority, maybe minority. I don't know. There's a lot of people asking for me to do it for different games too, and that's not happening. I'm not going to be working on this for any other game. I just want to support Melee. That's what I want to do. And what's coming? A bunch of stuff I mentioned: ranked, spectator mode. But a lot more too. I want to expand the site to have more, I want there to be player profiles. I want there to be like much deeper stat integrations, maybe replay analysis stuff, maybe like head-to-head statistics, maybe like an API to power tournament pre-game stats or whatever. Like what they do in tennis often is like the keys to victory. And it's like the sort of the stuff you need to do to win the match. And I think that would be really cool, helps drive a narrative. There's so much to be done. Like there's stuff on the AI side, building, AIs that play Melee. And I think like if you can build a good AI that plays Melee, you can then build a suggestion network. So like basically if you're a new player or maybe mid-level player is a better example. And you do a combo and your combo is quote unquote suboptimal, right? Maybe the AI knows that because the AI is like, this is what I would have done here. And it would have gotten me this much percent, maybe led to a kill or whatever. And it's like, this becomes a lot like chess where it's like the AI can then suggest like, hey, you could have done this instead of what you did and it would have been a lot better. And maybe they could show you like a video example too, because it knows how to play. So it can like load the state of like where that thing happened and then it can like show you what it would have done. So yeah, I mean, I think that's just a small taster. I think there's like, there's definitely more, maybe stuff I haven't thought of yet, but yeah, a lot to do.
Thanks for watching our feature on Project Slippi. Our videos are made possible by our patrons and special contributors. If you like what you've seen, consider checking out some of our other videos like our netcode talk with Keats, as well as supporting the channel by becoming a patron today. And if you'd like to see more Smash videos in the future, let me know in the comments below. Until next time.